This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. Here it is then, the piece of gear that you've no doubt been bombarded with in your feed by some folks that have been sent it, some folks have been paid to demo it. This video is slightly different because I bought it with my own money, and I guess that probably might make you think that I'm bitter with Fender, and possibly I am. But we're going to try and sort of have some honest chat and try to be unbiased and sort of reflect on the Fender Tonemaster from the point of view of where it actually fits into the modelling landscape. I'm going to do a few videos with it. I got this for £1,500 from Guitar. I think the street price in the UK is settling around £1,650, which puts it above the Quad Cortex, puts it above a Line 6 Helix, puts it above an FM3. I think it looks a bit better in person than I thought it might. So that's the unit. For comparison, EVH Effects is about the same size as a Quad Cortex, and yeah, it's kind of bigger in every direction by a couple of inches. That's what she said. If you mated a Quad Cortex with a Helix, I think you'd end up with something a bit like this. So you've got kind of the best things about the Helix, like the scribble strips, as well as the touchscreen of the Quad Cortex. The main thing that you do not have, which the Quad Cortex has, right, would be the capturing functionality. Kind of an important thing to note that is kind of missing at this product, given that they sort of pitched it as a Quad Cortex alternative. And then the main thing that it doesn't have that the Helix has is capacitive foot switch thingy, right? On the back side here, I guess you've seen all the ins and outs elsewhere, haven't you? Let's just hear how it sounds. If you want a quick summary of what's cool about this, here's one thing that I really like. You can swipe to the next block easily, or previous. That's kind of cool. Another thing that's cool is that the amp kind of shows up here. That looks pretty cool. Another thing that's cool, you've got an always available looper, so let's just try that for the first time. I'm gonna need the tuner. Let's see what that's like. Okay, seems to work like a tuner. Right, so Okay, so this arrived about sort of 3 hours ago. These are made in China, says that on them. And I wanted to give kind of like a little bit of a first impressions type video, because you're going to see a lot of the paid stuff. And I mean, my overall feeling on this is that if I was sent one of these by Fender, I'd be quite grateful, and I probably wouldn't be thinking the same way that I'm thinking right now, having spent £1,500 on this. In the UK, they are £16.49. Across the world, they're different prices. So, the good points, I think actually this is, versus the Headrush Prime, which kind of was a bit of a bigger unit, this is getting a little closer towards the Quad Cortex form factor, which I'm a big fan of. And yeah, in terms of having something that is a little bit more compact than perhaps the Line 6 Helix, which I think the Helix has to now take credit for an awful lot of pushing basically the state of the art modeling to basically where it is today. Essentially, if you put a touchscreen on a Helix, you'd more or less be at where we are at the moment. And LeonTodd made a really good point in his video. It kind of feels like either this is the end of the current generation of modelers, or maybe it's the new. Well, to me, it doesn't feel like the new generation, because actually this doesn't do particularly anything that unique. So the Quad Cortex, when that came out, it was kind of a big deal that A, it had a touchscreen, B, it could do the Kemper thing, and C, it had kind of more power than most other things on the market. Now, this also has more power, although you won't really know from using it that a lot of the power is kind of hidden in the fact that it can do the seamless preset switching thing. Well, what that really means is that they're using 4 cores basically to sit idle in the background, presumably, or this could be a way that you would do it, like on the Helix, this is a way that you can do seamless preset changes. You separate out so that you've got something always waiting to load the next DSP in, and then if you switch, the other DSP can handle basically the spillover stuff. Right, so form factor, really good. The UI is surprisingly, I wasn't necessarily thinking, oh, well, you can't play a UI, am I going to be that impressed by it? It is really nice. It does look a step, I think, above the Quad Cortex, and yeah, it does look a little bit more up to date, a little bit more skeuomorphic, it's a word we'll come on to later, and also a little bit less just like an Android menu. It's kind of got some cool stuff about it. And as I say, the skeuomorphic aspect of it, I think, is really quite cool, especially when you're like tweaking amps and stuff. In some ways, I guess, well, I'll leave that up to you to judge what you think of how it looks. Here's the real kicker though. I don't think it sounds as good as the Quad Cortex did out of the box. I can remember kind of playing around with the Quad Cortex presets, and I thought, well, these are better than the Helix factory presets. These sound better. Similarly with the Fractal factory presets, when I first played some of them, I thought these sound better too. The Fender Tone Master, to me, I've got to say, like, some of the factory presets just sound to me like any other modeler. And that's not necessarily a huge diss, but I'm not getting sort of blown away by any of it. I'm not getting the sense, well, that sounds uber realistic. I'm not getting the sense that that sounds unlike anything I could get out of any of my other devices. I think it's important, you know, Fender have sent these out to some people who have openly said in videos that they don't normally use a modeler. Well, if you normally used a modeler, you'd be very used to, I think, getting tones as good, if not better than this, pretty much all the time. And that's kind of the downside of it for me. Anyway, this is like a brief kind of overview looking at the bits and pieces that you might find interesting in the Tone Master Pro. I think I might be one of the first people to show the looper. I've had it for, you know, like a couple of hours in between making a Neural DSP video. I've got around to doing this. But honestly, at the moment, if you have a Quad Cortex, I wouldn't be thinking about switching over. I think at launch, this is more impressive in some ways than the Quad Cortex, but it is missing that real key thing, which is the capture technology, which does actually make a difference, I think.
particularly when a lot of what else is there is kind of similar. I do think the UI I prefer on this, although the routing of the Quad Cortex is way more flexible, and you could plug in multiple things and have multiple signal paths. That doesn't really have that same capability and flexibility. The looper is way more basic in this as well. The looper in the Quad Cortex is kind of pushing things forward in a way that this isn't. And I think, to me, certainly the Fractal device has way more Fender amps in it than this, and yeah, more unusual, more unique Fender amps, different circuits of the same amp. I think the Quad Cortex might even have more Fender amps in it than this, and the Line 6 probably has as many. So it's a bit of a, yeah, it's not bad at all by any means, but as people have been saying, expensive, possibly, yes, it's possibly expensive, but if you compare it to a Quad Cortex, if you compare it to an FM9, an Axis 3, is it expensive? If it was your first modeler, which I think is part of who they are targeting, then yes, it's an awful lot of money to spend on a modeler. And I'd think probably if this is your first experience with a modeler, you might be better off getting something a little bit smaller, a little bit more on the budget end of things, whether that's something like an HX Stomp, whether that's a Hotone Ampero Stomp, whether that's whatever else. I don't think necessarily that this is your ideal first modeler. I don't know. And if you've already got a Quad Cortex, then you're probably watching this thinking, yeah, I'm not thinking that I'm going to sell that at all. I'm guessing, especially where the Quad Cortex is now, where it looks like pretty soon the plugins might be able to be ported over, in which case you'd have something else which is kind of unique about it, where this doesn't have too much unique about it yet. You can't play a UI. Here's some stuff.
So I think the first thought that I'm having whilst plugging this in, I'm sort of getting, you know, a bit of deja vu between the Quad Cortex and the Helix, but I'm thinking, thank fuck there's not a external power supply. This is my first time turning it on. Let's see how quick boot time is. I'm not going to edit this or anything like that. This is going to be my first kind of play of the unit. You'll know that hopefully on this channel I do, you know, tend to stick with a piece of gear for a while and try and, you know, eke as much video stuff out of it as possible. But I'm going to hope that it's going to be useful stuff for you as a consumer that is going to have to spend money rather than, yeah, something else. Is this working? Firmware update available. Right, we're going to ignore that for now. So my first impressions looking at this as a unit for the first time is I feel like the screen is one aspect here, you know, just off the bat, which to me looks more attractive than the Neural DSP screen. First of all, we got more color elements. The Neural DSP screen is kind of a little bit monochrome is probably what I should be saying. Right, so let's kind of, I don't know, move something. Right, everything is feeling like it responds quite quickly. I'm liking the look of the units. I can see that it's a space delay. I can see that it's a deluxe reverb. I can see that that is something Prince of Tone based, or yeah. So that's bypassed. At the moment we are clearly in preset view. Now here is the one thing that I think that this unit has that nothing really else on the market has yet. Something that the Helix can do. We are switching between presets. Okay, if we go into foot switch mode, FS mode over here, much like the Helix. Push for gig view, exit view, and that has kicked us into preset. Gig view looks like that. That's our gig view, is it? I mean, that feels like a fairly useless view. Like, what do we get out of that? Just shows us 165 deluxe reverb. Okay, so I mean that view feels like there's work to be done on the gig view, right? Because although we've got Stribble scripts, so we're kind of fine anyway, but like on the Quad Cortex, that would be showing you what is on each switch, kind of, or on the Helix, what would that be showing you? I'm trying to think. Not too much, but anyway, that's kind of, I don't know, kind of looking at that and thinking that's kind of a placeholder, right? Let's go back to this deluxe reverb. So the other thing that is kind of unique about this, I feel like this is the most skeuomorphic design going. Now, this might seem like it's sort of bollocks what I'm about to say, but in theory, and I don't know if you've tried this yourself, I remember Tom Quayle talking about this, if you look at a real amp whilst you're playing a modeler, you can sort of trick your brain a little bit more. And there is something to be said. So like plugins, the whole point of having a UI for plugins is that it gives us that real world feel. Now, in some ways this might seem like a bit of a glossy kind of thing, and maybe this is something that's going to add to your experience as a guitarist, or maybe it's not. But to me, that looks kind of more inviting than just a list of parameters with sliders, for example. And because they've got that visualization, I feel like this actually lines up quite well in a way that the Quad Cortex, for me, it always felt like there was all these parameters. I never really ended up using the knobs here because there was too many. Whereas here, I don't know, I'm getting the feeling like this is something that I could actually use a bit more. That's another unique thing actually about this. So here, for the first time that I can remember in a modeler, you've got not only the amp model itself, you've got a reverb built in and a trem built in. That is pretty cool, I think. Let's check out actually. So if we go in here, how do I switch the device? Replace, you click replace. So amp only, Princeton reverb, 65 super reverb, twin, bass breaker. So there's actually not that many Fender amps compared to something like a Fractal device, or even the Quad Cortex. I think has more than this. We got a deluxe reverb, a Princeton, the super reverb, a twin reverb, the bass breaker, and a Blues Junior. So, oh, actually we've got a Vibra King there as well, right? Actually, in terms of amps here, amp heads. So this should give us everything, right? So what's actually included? We got a deluxe reverb, Princeton reverb, super reverb, twin reverb. Now all of those are actually fairly similar, right? Preamps at least. I think that's true to say. They got slightly different power outputs, but those are mostly built on the same circuit, I believe. Bass breaker, Blues Junior, some Marshalls, a triple rectifier, 5150, Friedman BE 100. This is one that I want to check out. Studio preamp, tube preamp, some Voxes. That, I think there may be a couple more if I do the firmware update, but that's not a ton of options, right? Confirm. Right, and I need to put in a cab actually, don't I? So let's just add in a cab,
Plus cabinets, and we'll go down to the Friedman V30, confirm, put that here. So the touch screen element of it is working really nicely. I like the look of it. The look of all of this stuff is really clean. Let's use the SM7B and where it is, but I'm going to move it to the cone edge. Well, no, cap edge. Cap edge, move it a bit closer. We've got this little grid thing. And also we've got a high cut, which is set at 6 by default. Okay, and then if we go like this, you can get, that's really cool actually, in terms of mic choices. We've got condensers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 choices there. Let's go to our amp. So what we don't have here on this B100 is many. Oh yeah, we do have all of the options here, so that's kind of cool as well. So much like the Helix BE, we've got them kind of put into the same channel, at least, like the same model. So that's another element that until recently most modelers haven't done. Let's see what happens if I get rid of this high cut, because how do I edit that high cut? Right. So low cut filter. Cool, so like that's pretty decent sounding, I think. I got not really complaints around the tones. Vibra Blues. Does it sound like other modelers though? And I think the answer for me is signal path type. This is one of the other sort of possible deal breakers here, is that you've got a slightly limited set of preset signal path types, which is kind of interesting because Quad Cortex, Axe-Fx and Helix are all kind of flexible these days. So this is a bit of a step back in some ways, but probably most people are going to be served by that. Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my very first plugging it in. Yeah, I mean, for me, So, yeah, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Select node to add. What do you mean? Coming soon. What does that mean? Push mixer. That's pretty cool. Like, it all looks pretty clean. The area for me also doesn't necessarily look like can add a ton of blocks beyond that, but I think the point is that with that seamless switching you don't really have too much of a problem anyway, because you'd be able to switch in other stuff. So let's just quickly go through what's available in here. I think there must be other videos showing all of that stuff anyway. Effects, Bighorn Fuzz, Blues Breaker, Boost, Enchanter, Green Box, Hard Clip Distortion, Maximus Drive. So a good range of drives there. I'll do other videos on this, of course. Getting into the mods now. I like that it's a continuous kind of menu. That does mean that I'm not having to jump in and out of the menu to change other aspects. Bunch of reverbs. So I think at this point as well, it's probably in a better position than, for instance, the Quad Cortex was at launch, although missing that key unique selling point that the Quad Cortex had. So let me know your thoughts. That's the video to start, you know, just first glance at it. I'm going to spend some more time with it, but at first glance, I really like certain aspects of it. There doesn't seem to be too much unique about it. I'm not sure that the sounds, like the presets on the Quad Cortex, for instance, sounded really good straight out of the box. I'm not sure this necessarily does. And I'm not sure that it has a party piece that would mean that someone who had a Quad Cortex or was considering buying one would think, well, I need to get that instead. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.